questions soon, but I want to start by saying thank you to Jrue and KP and Luke for all that they gave here and all that they meant here. I think I could go into great detail on each of them, but Jrue being here for 2 years, KP being here for 2 years, obviously had a huge impact, not only on our team, but on the city and the community and everything else. And Luke being here a little bit longer than that, same thing. And so we wish those guys well. We'll be rooting for them from afar. I'm happy to answer any questions about them, but I think that's really important to say because those guys are all, really important people to all of us.
Questions?
Hey, Brad, regarding the signings of Luka Garza and Josh Minott, what did you see in them that led to those moves, and what's your expectations for them coming here?
I think one of the things that obviously we've been limited in the, what tools we can use with where we are right around the second apron. And so we're looking for guys on those contracts that have upside, that are competitors, that are workers, that want to be good, that haven't hit their peak yet, but we've seen something in them that we think gives them a chance to be very impactful. Luka obviously has been a stats darling, but in limited time behind very, very good players. And same thing with Minott. Minott is a guy that brings a lot of versatility to the table. Is a person that can guard several positions, can shoot a little bit, but plays with great energy and length. And both those guys really rebound. And so. As we have a team that is being retooled, right? I think the biggest thing is that bringing in guys that can complement our best players and our core, but also have some upside and maybe some unrealized upside thus far. And so, and they were in a great situation. They were coached by a great coach in Chris Finch, in a great organization with a ton of talent, and they're used to winning. I like that too.
And Peyton is someone who always talks about challenging himself, having a growth mindset. What are the keys coming off a career year to maximizing the opportunity that's in front of him next season?
Peyton Pritchard?
Yes.
I haven't thought a ton about how much roster change will change Peyton Pritchard's work ethic because it's always at the highest. He's as good as it gets with his work. So Peyton will prioritize winning, which he always has, and will continue to grow in his game, which he always has. That's what he does. That's who he is. I've said many times, loves basketball. And that love basketball, loves to compete, loves to play hard. Those factors all matter. We had those with the guys we lost, and we will be continuing to look for those with the guys we bring in.
Brad, you sort of mentioned it in your opening statement. It's always hard to trade guys like Jrue and Kristaps, but there's been all the talk of like financial situations and aprons and luxury taxes. I'm curious how much the second apron penalties came into those two trades as well as luxury taxes, because you guys have been a second apron team for 2 years before those.
The second apron's why those trades happen. I think that those are pretty obvious. And the basketball penalties associated with those are real. We've all talked about that. And but we were fortunate because we liked the guys we got back, and I think that that's one of the things that, we are excited about. But yeah, like Jrue Holiday is I think he stamped his Hall of Famer candidacy here, if he didn't already have it. We'll look forward to watching and again rooting and following him from afar. But he's as good of a person as you could ever have in your building and as part of your team. And KP, he fought some of the stuff health-wise in the last 2 years, but when he played, he was awfully good, and we think he'll be awfully good for Atlanta this year. And so again, yeah, those are not easy trades to make. Those are not easy phone calls. Obviously, those guys have been around the league a long time. They knew the CBA. They knew that was a high likelihood that they could be part of a move, and they were communicated that before. But it's still hard when you are. But again, we will miss them, and we're thankful for them.
And then what about those two guys, Anthony and Georges,
Yeah.
made you target them in those types of trades?
Well, I just think one at a time. I think Anthony is a guy that people out here probably don't see as much because of the time that they play. But his ability to score, his ability to shoot the ball, make really hard shots is pretty elite. And you look at a guy that's 26 years old that's averaged 20 a game for 3 straight years. I think he's a really good player, and I think he can get better, and that's a big part of it. And then Niang has just added value to winning on each team he's been on, and it's he's a pain to play against, which I very much admire. And he knows what he does well, and he knows how to bring out the best in his group. It's not a coincidence that he was a part of the rotation on those really good Philly teams. He was a part of the rotation this year in Cleveland before the trade. Like, guy is a winner, knows how to play, knows how to bring out the best in people, and happy he's here.
Me? At least from the outside coming into this season, the expectations, the outlook will likely be different this season. So insofar as you're concerned, as the guy who runs the organization, aside from the obvious, which is that everyone works hard and focuses and so forth, what are your expectations for this season?
My expectations are always the same. Compete like hell to win the next game. That's always going to be it. That will always be it. And that's the way that we're going to try to put our foot forward. We've got some new guys. We've got some guys that'll have to take on extra in their roles. But we believe in the guys that have been in the building, and we look forward to getting the guys that haven't, and all working together to try to create a team that functions well together and plays hard as hell. And that'll be it. I've said many times that the North Star for me is winning championships, and this is without question. When you trade guys like Jrue and KP, there's some retooling going on. But the one thing that when I was coaching, when the term rebuild came up, I thought it was a crazy term. None of us were here before, so it should be build, right? You're always building and growing towards something. And for this group, we've got so many guys back that are really good players that's not going to be part of the lexicon in our building. And that's the way we're going to focus moving forward.
Brad, you mentioned after the draft that re-signing Al Horford would be a priority. Is that still a priority to you guys at this point?
I don't know what I can say about this or not say about it. I mean, we made offers to both Luke and Al. We would love to have had both of them back. I'd say that's unlikely. And the only reason I haven't talked about Al is because that's not final. I could probably talk about Al my whole press conference and not say enough. But I don't want to speak in absolute terms until an ultimate decision is made. But another guy that if he were to go and play somewhere else, I think is an all-time Celtic and winner and did everything he could for this organization and not only from the games but also how he impacted our younger players who in a lot of ways now have to take what they've learned from the Jrues and the Als and people like that and apply that from a leadership role.
Brett, I know the tools you have, you're limited in what you can do now for the rest of the offseason here, but how do you kind of view the roster right now? Are you still looking, could you go into next season with this roster? Are you still looking at potential tweaks? Where would you want to address things if you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of kind of the schedule of things, right, is there'll probably be some conversations that all 30 teams have in Vegas, but it's a lot less than around the draft and a lot less than, even around as the moratorium comes to a close. And so I'd say that, who knows what will happen. But as far as us, we're very comfortable with this group heading into next season.
Sort of building on that, there's been a lot of talk about the second apron, but how driven are you by possibly getting out of the luxury tax and maybe starting to reset the repeater tax? And how much of a factor does that play in the situations you guys, the decisions you guys make?
I mean, I think there's value in those things, obviously, and you weigh those values, and the people at the top have to ultimately make those decisions. But it's been pretty clear, and Bill has been pretty clear from the get-go that he wants to make sure that we're prioritizing basketball assets and the ability to retool this thing at the highest level that we can. And, again, the most important, acquisition that we're going to be able to make in the next couple of years is getting Tatum out of a boot, right? Like, we're not beating that one. So that's going to be the best thing that can happen for us. But, everything else we want to, we have most of our first round picks still, other than the 29 one. We have a lot of seconds now, so we have some flexibility there, and we don't want to take away our chance to use those to become the best that we can be over the next few years, just to make a move to help save money. And I think that that's been very clearly stated to me. And I think that that's, we'll continue to look at how we can make things a little bit better or tweak things around the edges, and maybe something comes up in the next couple of weeks. But, that's been our mindset.
Right. I just kind of want to follow up on that, because the repeater tax is a sort of basketball penalty, right? Because,
Sure.
So resetting the repeater tax, is that a priority for you guys?
Like I said, there's benefits to that, but it's not the priority, right? The priority is continuing to make sure that we have, our future firsts and all these things that are in play for us, so that we can then use those to build.
Brad, back here. How, after going through what you went through and knowing how difficult, or finding out how difficult it would be, how optimistic are you about sooner rather than later getting back to that championship level that you want to be at?
Yeah, I mean, I said this when I was coaching all the time. I'd never put a ceiling on any team. We were fortunate to have a number of teams there as we led up to this kind of window that were really fun, and that I thought never really cared about ceilings and had a chip on their shoulder, and I expect that this team will too. I mean, the last time that, Jaylen Brown was on a team that was doubted was a long time ago, right? And the last time that Peyton Pritchard's been on a team that was doubted, he probably hasn't been yet. So, and you go down the list, Derek White and all these guys. So I'm excited to see what this team has in store. I know Joe's excited. Joe seems, they're trying a bunch of stuff out there now with our summer league team that we haven't done in the past, that I think will be really, it'll be good experimentation at the very least. But that's kind of what we want to make sure we're ready to maximize this group.
I want to clarify something you said last time. You said Joe has multiple years left on his contract.
That's right.
And how big of a priority is possibly coming to an extension with him, coming to something long-term this summer?
We'd love to have Joe here for a long time.
Brad, you've had to make a lot of tough calls in the past few years. Has it gotten any easier for you delivering the trade news to guys like Jrue and Porzingis, and how'd they handle that?
No, it's never easy. Well, Porzingis was asleep, and by the time he woke up, I was asleep. But he knew he was probably going to get traded, so I think he was okay by then. But no, we talked. I actually talked to both those guys a couple weeks before, and just said, like, listen, there's a chance that you're back, but there's also a high chance that you're not. And the agents have done a good job of understanding the challenges of the new CBA and the second aprons, and it was really important for us to again, get us out of that penalty box in a lot of ways, because you can feel those, and those are real things. And so I had conversations with both of them prior to, so there's still hard phone calls to make. It's harder to think about, like, not seeing Jrue and KP in and around the facility every day. That's the hardest part.
Brad, so just curious, I know obviously these penalties were always going to be in place, and you knew that heading into the season. Tatum goes down, that's the part you didn't know. How much did that impact these offseason moves? And do you think that we maybe would have seen a lot of these moves anyways, regardless of his injury? Like, how much did it change the trajectory of this offseason?
It's a good question. I think the reality is that we knew going into this year, regardless of how it ended, that we were going to have some really hard decisions to make because of the penalties. Because of the way that this apron is and where we've been the last couple of years. We've been now in it for 2 years, and and it was the 2 years that are the least punitive years. Now that it's fully kicked in 3 years after the CBA started. So that was part of making the decision to push and put our chips on the table and go for it the last 2 years. But we've known for a long time that hard decisions were coming. And I think the agents and players have known that too. I mean, that's been pretty well communicated. Tatum's injury certainly is something that we have to consider, but more so, I think it's about we've still been very focused on, okay, we're going to have some change. We have limited tools to bring back the guys like Luke or Al, the guys that we've really appreciated being here. And how do we bring in the right people then that have upside that can accentuate Jalen and Derek and Peyton and Sam and make sure that we continue to, build and grow this thing and put ourselves in position to maximize it.
And then the big man rotation is the one that was the most hampered this summer with the offseason moves. What are your thoughts on the guys that you currently have on the roster and their ability to be kind of holding down the fort in the front court?
We're going to find out, right? I think I think we had an incredible luxury with Luke and Nimi as our third and fourth centers, because I think they were both much better than that. And I think Luke will have an amazing impact in San Antonio, and I think Nimi has a great chance to be impactful here. We've always liked Luka Garza from afar, and we think that he has, the real physicality that's necessary on both ends of the floor, especially on the glass, in addition to his ability to score. And then, you got Amari, who's down there now, and we think that he has a high upside. And then you can flex other guys into that center role. Tillman is more of a 4 probably, but he can flex into that center role. And so we'll have to do that by committee. That group will not be the group that people will single out based on paper on what they've done with their careers thus far as our strongest position. But it's up to them to prove it otherwise.
You just mentioned the CBA a few minutes ago, and so you kind of knew something along these lines was coming. So my question is, the Tatum injury obviously changed it. Is that correct? I mean, it took it from here to here. Would you agree with that?
What do you mean?
In terms of your off-season busyness, that the Tatum thing would have changed things?
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Where we end up, how it goes, who knows, right? There's all kinds of factors. But yes, that without question brings, some clarity. But listen, at the end of the day, we've known again that we were going to push that. We've been in that area or in that second apron area for 2 straight years. We knew that this was going to be, being in it the third straight year was going to be very punitive.
All right. So I guess my question is, when was there a moment, as you look back on this years from now, was there a moment, the minute Tatum was injured, the morning after, when you were shaving, you were on the phone, when it occurred to you that whatever you were planning, you need to fold that into it and readjust and so forth?
It's a good question. I think that moment, when we traded for Brogdon, we knew we were getting into, we knew what was coming, right? Eventually, but we knew we were going to put the pedal to the metal. And then when that became Holiday, same thing, right? So in each of those moments, and you have meetings and you think about it. And then when Tatum goes down, it certainly makes you, okay, let's all get together. Let's talk about what this means. Let's talk about what it means in the near term, long term. Because I think one of the things about the Tatum injury that is really important to us is that there's no expectation on timeline to return, but there's an expectation on fully returning. And so that was part of it too, right? But yeah, each of those things probably factors in. It's a good question. Oh, God, I don't know. Was there a moment? I mean, I knew when I walked back to the locker room, and so there was probably a moment that night, staying in New York and on the phone and talking about it and thinking about it. I don't think when you watch the Pacers go through it in Game 7, I know Mike and I were both, in conversation with their GMs, like anything we can do to help, let us know, because we've been through it. It looked like it on TV. Those are hard things to go through, and they're emotional, but it's more emotional about, and it's probably more impactful, Steve, for how you feel about the player. Like, just, you hate to see that. And so that is a lot less. You're not talking as much about the team building yet, but there are moments in the next few weeks where you do.
Final questions, Gary, Adam, and Ian.
Right. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis on next year because of the getting under the second apron and Tatum being out. But it seems like there's got to be preparation now for taking advantage of the window that Tatum and Brown still have when they take Jalen be 29 in October. Tatum's going to be 28 or something when he comes back. Like that window where you have two kind of, top 15 players. What's the emphasis on preparing the team for 26, 27 and beyond, preparing a team around Jason when he returns to be championship contenders as opposed to you've kind of taken maybe the hit this year, but what's kind of the mentality of planning for the future?
It's a good question. I think the best way to say it, Gary, is since I moved into this role, my entire focus has been making sure we maximize around those guys. And so that's longer than just this upcoming window. That's been this whole window.
It's kind of a two-parter on Jason. One, just kind of how is he doing? Obviously we see the updates, walking in the pool. Seems like he's here a lot from social media. And also, I'm sure you saw the Pacers yesterday ruled Tyrese out for the year already to kind of remove pressure, remove distractions. Is that something you guys anticipate looking at? I know you've talked about not putting a timeline for return, but have you? Is that something you guys?
We're
will
not
consider?
even talking about timeline for return. We're not even going there. And Jason is working every single day. He has literally been here every day, except he took a few days break. But when he takes a few days break, Nick goes with him, so he's still working every single day. It's been unique to be here in June and the early part of July, and both Jason and Jalen are here. We've played obviously late, and this is usually a time where guys get away, but coming off of each of them having surgery, they've both been here. Jalen was in this morning, did a shooting workout, looks good, and Jason was in moving pretty fast on that boot today. So all indications are they're both progressing at incredible rates, which is great, but we're not going to put any pressure on Jason to get back anytime soon. And, we have no reason to believe that Jalen won't be all cleared and ready to go, fairly shortly.
Speaking of Jalen, he's probably going to be the number one option, quote unquote, so to speak, for next season. Have you communicated that with him? What's his reaction to that? And, how is he embracing that role moving forward next year?
I leave all those communications to Joe. The way that I look at a basketball team is we all bring our strengths to the table and then we function together. So everybody has a huge role in it. There's no question that Jalen will draw the most attention and that Jalen will, I think thrive in that. I think that you saw him several times, and you saw him in certainly the few games in the playoffs where we had to play without JT, and I thought he did a good job, especially those two home games. And I think that he's ready for any challenge. He always has been, and I'm excited to see all these guys, take a step up again. I'm excited to see the chip on their shoulder. I think that's I think we've always had it. I think it's always been we've had a competitive group with a competitive mindset. But we've, maybe had much higher expectations or some higher expectations. So I'm excited to see us get ready to go, and Jalen will be a big part of that.
Thank you, Brad. Hope you enjoyed the opening act. Matt Reynolds' show opens.
Matt Reynolds? Yeah.
Good. Thanks, everybody.